Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tigers podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Borash. I'm here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold. Days of Roar from the airport in Miami. Been to that airport many a time, not too far from lots of fun stuff, be it South Beach, be it North Miami Beach, be it the beach. So, Ev, how was Miami?
Well, I did not go to the beach. It was all work, no play for me this weekend. But yeah, I mean, it was a fun series. I mean, I know we're going to jump into it with the Miguel Cabrera stuff, but it was a really cool weekend for him. And especially coming off the Shohei Ohtani week that we got to see at Comerica Park. But no, I mean, Miami was good. Everything is kind of crazy right now. I mean, you got the Tigers going through Miguel Cabrera's final games in Miami. He played all 3 games in the series, and it was a really good turnout. And then it just so happens that the Tigers have an off day on Monday. The trade deadline is Tuesday, and then there's Wednesday, and then another off day on Thursday. So it's just like a lot is all going on at once. It's a crazy time to be a baseball beat writer. But yeah, here I am in the Miami airport, Days of Roar from the port. I got a connection to catch in Atlanta that'll take me back to Detroit. Then I'm driving to Pittsburgh on the morning of the off day. Hopefully I can get stationed there just in case, some trades are made. Who knows? Scott Harris, if you're listening, maybe you're going to make a trade here in the next hour while we're recording. Who knows? But no, yeah, a lot going on with the Tigers right now and currently sitting in an airport waiting for this flight to get going.
Well, I think there's no questions asked that Scott Harris will be making a trade as soon as we finish recording this podcast just because. So
it always seems to happen out that way.
Yeah, it does. It would have been nice if you could have knocked these things out before we started, but yeah, I got a feeling we're going to be doing a special episode of Days of Roar, trade deadline edition. So we had a 1-5 week. Was not a good week. A lot of bad baseball by the Tigers. They vary between listless and I can't finish off a game we should win. So a lot of those games. Had 3 of those this week. Kind of a weird time. Today was just sloppier than a pancake breakfast. And they just couldn't seem to get out of their own way. Whether they couldn't cover first base or they couldn't make good reads and they got thrown out at the plate twice. They just pretty much about everything. But it was a fun week, though. And, what'd you think? And, this weekend, we have to admit, Miguel Cabrera, up to the task, baby. He was just unfreaking believable, hitting the ball everywhere, hitting it hard, driving in runs, tipping his cap and signing autographs and having a good time. How was that?
Yeah, it was a really cool experience just to watch all that unfold. And, you could tell it was a really big moment for him, really a huge weekend for him. He talked about it with, Saturday's game, the Tigers won. And they won in a shutout, and he had some big hits, and it was just like a really good moment for him, standing ovation a few times in that game. And every time he came up to bat, it was kind of like when he was chasing, 500 or when he was chasing 3,000. Like everybody was on their feet, witnessing a historical, moment, right? Like that's what it was. And he called that, one of the best games of his career, one of the moments that he's always going to remember. Speaking directly to Saturday's game. But yeah, it all started with a Friday press conference, and he talked to reporters for more than 20 minutes, mostly in Spanish. So shout out to M Live's Evan Woodbury. We sent the transcription over to him. He knows Spanish, so he transcribed and kind of got it all written out for us and, did the flip from Spanish to English. And then we were able to run with, the quotes. And so shout out to you, Evan. Thanks for getting that done. But yeah, it was cool. I appreciated being a part of it and like being able to see it and, getting to report on it. It was cool from the pregame festivities that they had on Friday where they were able to give him some gifts. He got a nice cigar box and a humidor that had, Cabrera on it, and it was all, custom made. And then also a really cool custom bottle of rum and some packaging that had, Florida Marlins, 2003 World Series, type design on it. You got to meet Dave Concepcion or see him in person and talk to him. That's his idol growing up. So there was just a lot of great things that happened. It was Miggy night on Friday, Venezuela celebration night on Saturday, and it was kind of a whole Miggy weekend. And then he went out there and he played well. And that was the other really cool thing, was that he went out there and did what he needed to do to put on a show for the fans. And I thought that was really important for him, also important for the fans. And yeah, he's loving every step. But I think it's finally starting to set in, though, that the end is near. The end is very near.
Well, still, it was really fun to watch him play well, to be really honest with you. I mean, some big hits, ground rule double, just a smoke shot double today in a huge spot. Look, guy's been here for 16 years. The greatest player I've ever watched, and I watched Al Kaline's entire career essentially. It's just a beautiful thing to watch him go out like this. You just never could have expected. I know that all of us talked quite a bit before the year started, and we almost had a pool of when we thought he would finally conk out this year. And you and I talked, we talked with Cody about it. We all thought it would be a shock if he made it till August 1st. And tip of the hat, Miguel Cabrera just firing on all cylinders the last 2 months, giving us all the finger and going out like the GOAT that he is. I mean, what a beautiful, beautiful part of baseball history.
And hat tip to the Marlins, too. I mean, they really did it right this weekend. They really did it right. I mean, they honored him in every possible way that they could. Shout out to the fans for coming out on Saturday, especially. I mean, that game, that was packed. I mean, that was the most fans they've had in that ballpark, aside from WBC, World Baseball Classic, in like 5-6 years. I mean, they packed the place for Miguel Cabrera in Venezuela Celebration Day. Like, that was pretty awesome to be a part of. I mean, you got Bo Brisky coming out, and he was hitting like 98 on the radar gun with his fastball in the first inning. And I asked him the next day, I said, you amped up to start again? Is that what it was? Because he's been working out the bullpen and, was operating as an opener for Saturday's game. And he said, that atmosphere was pretty good too. So it had everybody amped up. Everybody knew what was going on. Hat tip to the Marlins. They really did it right.
Well, it's nice to see the Marlins do something well, and to be really blunt about it. They don't hit much, but scrappy as hell team, and really like a lot of their pitching. They made quite a few moves, quite a few trades, got some interesting players. Their bullpen is really, really good, and they just refused to lose today. I mean, what'd you think about them?
Yeah, no, I mean, shout out to the Tigers offense for what they were able to do against Jesus Luzardo. I mean, that's a guy, fun, side story is, back when he was like 6 years old, he went to the 2003 World Series when the Marlins were playing against the Yankees, and he went with his grandpa. Got Miguel Cabrera to sign a ball and throw it to his grandpa, and that ball's been with him ever since. And kind of talked about, and we went and talked to him. A lot of the Detroit reporters did, and he just talked about how that was like a really influential part of his baseball journey. And so, yeah, kind of a cool side story, for today's game, because he finally got to face Miguel Cabrera for the first and only time in his career. And of course, Cabrera had the double against him. Also had a ground out in the first at bat, but that double was pretty nice. But he's a good pitcher. I mean, Jesus Luzardo has been on one for the Marlins really all season long, and Tigers were able to get to him. They worked him. They were able to work deep into counts. They had some timely hits. They weren't able to get anything in the first couple innings. Then they exploded for a 4-run inning that put them in a good spot to try to win the game. It was just too bad. Things went back and forth, and there were some misplays by the Tigers, and just weren't able to get it done.
Yeah, Jesus Luzardo almost back from the dead. A lot of people almost even wrote him off. Been traded 2 times. Ridiculous stuff. Throws 97, 98. Great change. Decent breaking ball. This year, put it all together. I think he's 8-5. Has less than a 3.30 ERA. Striking out 10 per 9. Big time arm. Big time. I mean, Skubal against Luzardo doesn't get much better in baseball. 2 of the best left-handers under 26 years old. Probably the second and third best left-handers in baseball under 26 years old. After Shane McClanahan, I actually had my friend John Verberg ask me that question today, so I was a little show prep ready for thinking about how good left-handers are that are under 26 years old in Major League Baseball. And I think you got to include Tarek Skubal in that, but I think we saw today what we've seen quite a few times with Tarek, and something he's going to have to learn how to do better, which is you got to limit the damage in an inning, especially when you sort of make it self-inflicted. I think AJ referred to it in the post-game news conference, which is didn't cover first base, went downhill very quickly after that. Started throwing balls in the middle of the plate, couldn't finish hitters. And you can't just be good when there's nobody on. You got to figure out a way how to keep the inning to 1 or 2 runs if things aren't going right. And he just couldn't do it against the bottom of the order on top of it. So it's kind of disappointing when you have the stuff that Tarek does, and you really seem to struggle under duress. It's a second out of the last 3 starts, and it was a problem quite a few times last year. So I think it's something they need to address and he needs to work on. Give me some of your thoughts about that.
Well, I think they will. I mean, that's. I don't think there's any question about that. Like, if there's anyone that's going to work and try to find solutions and try to find the answer, I mean, it's going to be the combination of Derek Skubal, Chris Fetter, and Robin Lund. I mean, those guys are obviously like the masterminds of pitching, and then Derek Skubal is going to work as hard as anybody to find the answers. So yeah, I mean, it was a lot like the start in Kansas City where he left a lot of pitches over the middle, and they, obviously you leave them over the middle, guys are going to hit it. These are all professional hitters. These guys are all getting paid to do their jobs. The only person that might not be able to hit a middle pitch right now is Eric Haas. He's been really going through it. But look, aside from that, like, he's going to figure it out. He's going to get it sorted, and he's going to be just fine. I have no doubts about Derek Skubal just because of how good the stuff is, and I know the work ethic. I've seen the work ethic. So no concerns there for me. Look, this is a guy who's still young. He's still learning himself, and this is a really big step for him. And once he's able to make this step, man, we talked about it last week on the pod. The sky is the limit for him. So just has to figure it out.
I want to touch on two other things. A, how great is Riley Green been? Holy smokes, he hit all kinds of fun, great at bats this week. Got a little bit of bad luck. Even could add 3 more hits this weekend. Things got deflected off of people, 2 fielders, and just so many good at bats. Whether he's working a walk, hitting a bomb into the stands in left field, ringing a shot today off of, I think, Tanner Scott down in the corner. Faced tons of tough lefties, really battled against them. He was pretty amazing. We saw Kerry Carpenter get a big hit off the left-hander this week. A lot of really, really interesting, good things for the Tigers. What are some of the things you saw?
Yeah, no, I mean, you want to talk about Riley Green. I like the way that he's using the whole field. That says something to me. That says that he's really locked in. When I saw the Oppo home run that he was able to take and drive to left field, that's something that at the beginning of the year, it was kind of middle of the field to opposite field, and he was not, pulling the ball to the pole side. He wasn't getting the ball to right field, and that was a problem for him. He made a slight mechanical adjustment and really started tapping into the pole side. And then it seemed super pole side heavy, and it was like, okay, is this guy going to be able to go back the opposite way? And to see him finally come around, coming back from this injury that he had, I mean, and that injury, like, there's still something that the Tigers are monitoring day in and day out to make sure that he's able to stay on the field. It's just the constant banging of the feet. And when you have a stress reaction, you don't want that to turn into a stress fracture at any point. And so, all signs he's healthy, right? But it's good to see him at the plate use the entire field. I mean, to see him take a home run to the left side and then to rip a shot down the line to the right side, like, that tells me that he's super locked in. And that also tells me that he's able to, manipulate and adjust the swing. He's able to get to pitches where he needs to get to them and then, can put him in play where he needs to. I mean, the guy's been on fire. He's red hot. He's as good as it gets. I mean, he makes this team go, and he's going to make this team go for years and years to come.
I think he's hitting close to 360 since the start of May, just, hitting the ball all over the field, walking a decent amount, extra base power tapping into it. It's been a beautiful thing to see, obviously, beyond the cornerstone. He is the straw that stirs the drink. And I also want to give a little bit of shout out to Spencer Torkelson. His swings are getting better. They're getting more consistent. Seeing him hitting the ball in the air to the pull side, which I've been begging him to do. And he's, instead of doing it for a few days at a time, he's seemingly getting one good swing like that almost every game now. And I think the ball will start flying out of the park a little more consistently. What have you been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, all signs point in the right direction with Torkelson. They have been, I think, from the beginning of spring training. Like, we've continued to see him get better and better and better. And sometimes it's a process and it takes some time. And I still think there's a lot ahead for him to conquer and accomplish. I do think he's getting the ball in the air to the pull side a little bit more or a lot more, I would say, than ever before. But at the same time, I mean, you still got to hit him for home runs, right? We talk about that all the time. I mean, you can get the ball in the air to the pull side is one thing. To fly out as opposed to hitting home runs is another thing. I think there's more power in the tank for him to untap. I think we might even see that next year. But yeah, no, signs point in the right direction with him. Like, there's no complaints with Spencer Torkelson. I think he's doing everything that he needs to be doing right now. And look, the Tigers aren't competing for the postseason, right? Like, they're not. That's just not the case. They're sellers at the trade deadline. Like, that's also a fact. So he has time. Like, they don't need him to, be the guy right now. There is still time to grow and there is still time to develop. There's he can fail and learn from it, right? And I think we're going to see some of that still down the stretch. And I really look forward to seeing what he's going to be like coming back for 2024, because I think we're going to see the best version yet of Spencer Torkelson in 2024 once he goes back home in the offseason, gets in the lab, and puts some work in.
Yeah, it's, last year, this last winter, he remade his swing. I think he'll be able to do this offseason.
Optimize it.
There you go. All right, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about Shohei Ohtani a little later because we both saw something this week that we'll never see again. But we're going to spend some time on it. But it's the trade deadline. So question 2 of the big 2. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? Let's go over some of the deals that already got made. Is Scott Harris locked in his office with a bunch of sandwiches? What's going on here?
Yeah, it's already been a pretty crazy trade deadline. The trade deadline isn't even here yet. Who would have thought Max Scherzer was going to be going to the Texas Rangers? That was something that, the Mets were kind of on the fence, buyers, sellers. What are they going to do? Are they going to make that push? Or are they just going to kind of, wave the white flag? And suddenly there's Max Scherzer going to the Texas Rangers. And I was pretty impressed by the fact that trade actually got done and got pulled off. And then the Rangers just keep on going. They made the trade with the Cardinals, and they got Jordan Montgomery, a left-handed starter, and Chris Stratton,
a good left-handed starter.
Yeah, a good left-handed starter. So they were able to pick up, those two players, Jordan Montgomery and Chris Stratton, from the St. Louis Cardinals. And those have kind of been like the two premier moves with the Rangers really stocking up. And I think, teams in the AL West, obviously the Houston Astros, they got to make a move. And it sounds like, maybe Justin Verlander might not be a trade candidate for them anymore. It seems like, Dana Brown, their general manager, might be backing off of that. But at the same time, their owner has a good relationship with JV. So maybe a trade happens there. But the Rangers are making moves. The Rangers are going for it. And if you're the Astros and you want any chance of trying to make a push, you got to go get somebody to fortify your starting rotation. I think you like what you have in your lineup. Every single day you got Altuve back, you got Yordan Alvarez back, but they're going to really need to get somebody in there who's going to be able to anchor that pitching staff. And who better to do that than Justin Verlander? But that's in the AL West. In the AL Central, the Chicago White Sox have dumped some players. The Twins haven't really done anything yet. The Kansas City Royals are selling off, and the Tigers are just kind of sitting there doing a whole lot of nothing right now. And obviously, well, right now, it's Sunday at 7 p.m. and they haven't done anything yet. So I think there's obviously time to still make something happen, but we haven't seen it yet. And there are two really big pitchers that they have to offer, in Eduardo Rodriguez and Michael Lorenzen, as well as some relievers. Well,
I tweeted my half kidding, half serious ideas of what I think is going on. I'm sure there's discussions that have been had, just
of
nothing.
Course there has been.
I think what we don't know is, are they making offers that, basically reflect the idea that you have a rookie general manager and they're trying to test him to see what he's got? Or is he overly cautious? Or has Erod discussed with them renegotiating or just not opting out? We don't know inside what's going on. You usually have your ear to the ground back there pretty well. Obviously Michael Lorenzen's getting traded, and so is Jose Cisnero. But what are you hearing about Erod inside?
Yeah, there's no doubt Michael Lorenzen is going to be traded. Jose Cisnero is going to be traded, and Chasen Shreve, a left-handed reliever, if they can find a suitable partner for him, he's going to be traded too. Those are three guys on expiring contracts. Eduardo Rodriguez is a much different situation, and it's all revolves around this opt-out that he has. So let me take you back to November 2021 when he signed his 5-year, $77 million contract. That was former general manager Al Avila, got that deal done and negotiated it. And the opt-out clause changes everything about his trade value, because he can opt out after this year, which would leave 3 years and $49 million on the table. And the problem is that teams that want Eduardo Rodriguez, and trust me, teams want Eduardo Rodriguez. If he was a 3-month rental, automatically a slam dunk, no question about it, the teams would be lining up. He might be the hottest, starting pitcher on the market. But because of the fact that he has his opt-out, there are some concerns from teams that are interested in him. The big question is going to be, okay, he's probably going to opt out, but what happens if he gets injured? And that's the big question. It has nothing to, look, this guy's going to go and become a free agent again next year, and he's going to make a ton of money doing it because he's pitched he's pitched well enough to deserve that. But if he gets injured, then maybe he opts back in. If it's, let's say it's, God forbid, Tommy John surgery. What if he needs Tommy John surgery? You probably opt back into that deal because you're not going to get that on the open market if you have Tommy John surgery or another major surgery or another significant injury, right? So that's the big concern.
Like a finger injury.
I mean, exactly, though, right? Like that, but right. I mean, that could be, something that is a problem, and that would maybe cause him to opt back into the deal. So the Tigers might not get him for equal value. They won't. They won't get him for equal value. They're going to have to trade him for lesser value or include him in a package as a standalone player that's traded from Team A to Team B. He's not going to be as valuable as the Tigers maybe would like to see, just because of the fact that he has the opt-out, and teams are going to be weary of that. Now, there's the other factor of it, and that's, hey, look, this guy wants to be in Detroit. Eduardo Rodriguez wants to be in Detroit. His family likes being in Detroit. He wants to stay. But again, there is, also the point of, know your worth, and he should know his worth and know that he's going to make a lot more money going back and being a free agent. But if the Tigers, and I haven't heard anything about them, renegotiating the deal. There haven't been any formal talks last I checked on a new contract. But he's a guy that you might be able to get to stick around if you tweak that deal. Now, what is it going to take to do that? I have no idea. All I know is that last I checked, there haven't been formal negotiations about that. But Eduardo Rodriguez wants to stay. So we'll see. I mean, I do think that if you're going to work out an extension, you have to do it before the trade deadline, because if you don't do it for the trade deadline, you lose all your leverage if you're the Tigers. Because then you can be post-trade deadline, and it's like, yeah, I'm not taking that. I'm just going to opt out. And the Tigers have no leverage to just trade him. So something would have to be worked out, I would have to think, before 6 p.m. on Tuesday. But that's the situation, is they're probably not going to get the exact value that they're looking for back. Eduardo Rodriguez wants to stay. And most recently, I've heard, no real formal talks about restructuring the contract. It's an interesting case.
It's an interesting case. Now, at the same time, pretty decent packages were attained for, Giolito, Montgomery. I mean, Lance Lynn. People are getting traded that are either have options or going to be free agents at the end of the season. So, I mean,
all three of those guys are going to be free agents at the end of the season. Giolito is going to be a free agent at the end of the season. Montgomery is going to be a free agent at the end of the season. I mean, the thing that holds up the Eduardo Rodriguez situation is the fact that nobody knows what's actually going to happen, because we won't know until we get there. We won't know until it's November and the World Series is over, and the question is going to become, okay, is this guy going to opt out or is he not? I mean, look, the season could end and he could hurt himself in the offseason doing something and hurt his arm. And, I mean, again, super rare, probably won't happen, but at the same time, what happens if he gets injured in the offseason between, maybe October and November, and then decides to opt back in? It might not even be an on-field thing. Anything can happen, and teams are going to want to protect themselves, especially, mid-market and small-market clubs. Maybe the Dodgers don't worry about that. Maybe the Dodgers aren't as concerned because they figure, okay, if he opts back in, whatever, we're getting a pretty good pitcher on a cheap deal, and maybe he's injured for a little bit, but then he comes back, and we're not paying him very much. But a smaller market club, they might have more concern about that.
Yeah, all I can say is, as much as I study the Dodgers, which is a lot, I'm starting to get concerned because every single prospect they deal sucks after they deal. So they look great when they're playing for the Dodgers, and somehow the development doesn't progress at the same rate once they hit a new team. So we'll have to see what happens with that. At the same time, in its most simplistic fashion, I think you're 100% right, but I do think teams just basically look at him as a rental. It's a bonus if he decides to stay and he's healthy, and which I think is very doubtful if he gets down. So be interesting to see what goes on. I'm sure there's some other players that are being discussed that we're not discussing, and it should be interesting to see what happens. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about trades after the break. We'll be back in a second. All right, we're back. So you have a premonition that you have an idea where two teams that are going to hook up. One of them's the Detroit Tigers. Tell me what you think you got in mind.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. There's always a long way to go in these kind of things, but I think the Tigers and the Arizona Diamondbacks are great trade partners, and that's not just me pulling that out of nowhere. That's from some good sourcing people that I've talked to that have said, hey, look, these two teams are probably going to hook up, and I know the Diamondbacks have definitely reached out to the Tigers and shared insight on which players that they like. Some of them controllable young players, and that'll be interesting to see if Scott Harris can get creative. That's another thing that we haven't really touched on enough, and it's hard to really touch on because you don't really know what's exactly going to happen until it happens. But, Scott Harris was lauded for creativity. I mean, that was thinking outside of the box, doing things, in ways that, people normally wouldn't think about doing them. And, the Arizona Diamondbacks have interest in some of the Tigers players, and some of those players are young, controllable players. The Tampa Bay Rays, they have some interest in some young, controllable players. Granted, some of those players that the Rays are interested in, the Tigers probably aren't going to want to part ways with, one of them being a pretty good catcher who's on the rise. But still, my point being with the Diamondbacks specifically is if they're interested in a young, controllable player that the Tigers have, I'll be interested to see how Scott Harris maneuvers that, and if he could maybe use that to maybe leverage more out of an Eduardo Rodriguez deal. Maybe that allows him to get a real prospect back, a real dude, someone who's going to be a middle-of-the-order type bat in the future that you can count on to be a guy. Like, again, I don't really know exactly if it's going to happen or how it's going to work out. I know that those two teams have been in some talks, but I don't know. I mean, like, we'll see. I know the Tigers like Alek Thomas. That's kind of been out there and reported by others as well. But he's a young position player who's in the big leagues right now. He'd play center field. He'd allow Riley Green to move to one of the corners. Like, maybe there's a way that you can sneak him into a deal. But, if those two teams hook up, maybe it's part of a bigger deal that includes several, young players and as well as, some players who are going to be free agents soon. So a lot to happen there. But those are two teams that I would watch, Tigers and Diamondbacks. I think we might see something there.
Well,
but I want to see how creative Scott Harris can get. That's what I want to see.
Me too. And just so you know, in case, anybody in Arizona gets ready to have an aneurysm and decides they want to trade Jordan Lawler, I'll be very eager to go pick him up at the airport for him. And they have a pretty good looking shortstop in Perdomo, and maybe there's a deal to be made there. I have no idea.
That's what I'm saying, though. I mean, but be able to get a guy like Jordan Lawler, you'd probably have to give up a young, controllable position player as well, someone who's going to be in Arizona for, the next 5-6 years, right, until they're a free agent, someone that they can control and they can have until they're a free agent, and that's way down the road. That's what they would want, a cornerstone that they see that maybe, the Tigers might look at and say, maybe we don't really need that player. Like, maybe we're really confident at developing pitchers and finding pitchers in free agency, and we got a lot coming up in our system that we think we can optimize. So maybe we can part ways with this young, controllable, starting pitcher. I'm not going to name names, but maybe that's, the type of conversation that they're having, and they send that player off to Arizona, and that obviously is going to, make the return significantly better, just because everybody wants players with control. Good teams all want good players with team control. And if the Tigers can find that player in their system that they don't really want or they don't really see as valuable moving forward, maybe that allows for a trade to happen and the Tigers to get a legit dude like a Jordan Lawler. Now, those trades are always the hardest to pull off, though. So keep that in mind as well.
Well, speaking of the Arizona Diamondbacks, we're going to throw it to something that we've been real excited to do here. We're going to start having a few guests over the coming weeks. Tonight we have an unbelievable guest, courtesy of Evan Petzold. We have Mike Ferrin, who hosts a show every day on MLB Radio called Power Alley with Jim Duquette. He was a guest analyst and, color person with Dan Dickerson on Tigers Radio a few weeks ago. He's an icon in the business. He's done play-by-play for World Baseball Classic, Futures games. He's, just a fountain of baseball information, and I'm excited to have him. Ev, what do you think?
No, I'm pumped. I mean, Mike Ferrin is as good as it gets. He's the best in the business. So he was doing color with Dan Dickerson when the Tigers were playing in Seattle, and we can ask him about it too. But just the conversations that we had, I mean, he opened my mind to just so many different possibilities when it comes to big things that I didn't even really think about, things that I couldn't even grasp at this point yet. And just picking his brain, it was like, I mean, this guy is just has so much knowledge, understands the game, both analytically and with the eye test too. Like that's what I appreciate the most about him is, he can look at something and he can see it and he can watch it. He can find the stats and data to back it up, but he's also got these gut feels that are really impressive too. And so I really enjoyed talking to him. He's been doing this for a really long time. He's one of my favorites to listen to on MLB Network Radio, and it's really an honor to have him on.
It is. Ferrin knows everybody, and he knows just a ton of stuff. So excited to have him. Without further ado, we're going to go to our segment with Mike Ferrin. All right, we're happy to have Mike Ferrin from MLB Radio, an icon in the business, as we said, guest of Power Alley, play-by-play man of many a famous baseball event, without getting too deep into the resume, which everybody pretty much knows. Mike, thanks a lot for joining us. We're here to talk a little baseball. It's 2 days before the trade deadline. We want to talk about your experience with the Tigers and what you think's going on. There's a lot of action going on these days.
Yeah, excited to be with you guys. So this is a fun time of year for sure.
So the first thing we wanted to touch on before we get into the trade deadline, you had a chance to do a few games on the radio for the Tigers with the icon, which one of the greatest play-by-play guys in the game right now, Dan Dickerson. Tell us what that was like.
You know, I had met Dan once. We'd had an extended conversation years ago when the Tigers were in Arizona, and that was about the only time that I think we'd ever really interacted. And everybody had said, you know, I've long been an admirer because to exactly what you said, Mark. I mean, he's one of the best play-by-play announcers in the business. And everybody was like, man, you'll love doing a couple games with Dan. He's such a great dude. And I think everybody undersold it. Like, he's just the best. His quest for knowledge is unmatched, which is something that I really appreciate. And he really loves this ridiculous sport. And that's another thing that I really appreciate because he wants to learn. He wants to look at it from different angles. And his joy for baseball is something that, you know, I share with him. So it was a lot of fun to be able to be next to him for 3 days, just watching the way he prepares, learning from him, spending time, just having the, you know, normal off-air conversations, laughing together. Man, I had an absolute blast. He's just the best. And he really is. I mean, he should be a winner of the Frick Award at some point because he is an absolutely spectacular play-by-play announcer.
Hey, well, Mike, thanks for doing this again. And we had two legends in the booth that day with you and Dan. I mean, he's as good as it gets, but, you know, you're right up there for me as well. So thanks for coming on, of course. And, yeah, you got to watch 3 games of the Tigers, got to see them up close. Obviously, you look at them from a national lens, too. What's kind of your thought on the current state of where they're at right now and where things are headed under Scott Harris?
You know, I knew somebody who was in to see them this weekend as part of their trade deadline coverage, and I haven't had a chance to follow up with him yet, but I wanted to know if he had the same take I did, which is I actually think they're further along than I anticipated in watching where they were. I think the pitching is really good, and I realized that, you know, Michael Lorenzen is almost certainly gone. There's a good chance that Eduardo Rodriguez is. I'm sure that they are going to get hits on their younger, controllable starters. But, man, the depth of quality arms, young quality arms, is really impressive. And I think there are some things to really like in the lineup. I think, obviously, Riley Green has been terrific since really the start of May. And I know that was interrupted by the foot injury, but he's been very good. There's nothing inside of Spencer Torkelson's at bats that make me really question whether or not he's going to be a solid major league player. I think it's just a little bit more experience that's necessary. I don't know that he's going to be a superstar necessarily, but I think he's going to be pretty good. And I really like Kerry Carpenter, and I think that trio gives you a pretty good basis for what can be part of the middle of a lineup that contends. There are a number of quality bullpen arms there, part of that youth. I mean, some of those guys, you know, Bo Brisky was the opener today. And, you know, I really like Brendan White, man. His stuff is really good. Jason Foley is good. Like, those guys can certainly help to either form a core of the next good Tigers team or help you acquire pieces that are bigger for that next good Tigers team. Because I think adding a couple of bats, and this is not easy, right? They probably need 2 bats that can hit in the top half of the lineup. If they can find a way to do that over the course of the next 6 months, I think they're going to be far more competitive in the American League Central a year from now. And I think there's enough there that you can start to get excited about their future if they're able to upgrade in a couple of those spots.
Well, the good news is from year to year between Chris Fetter, Robin Lund, Juan Nieves, they're very good at developing bullpen arms. They usually, you know, they're just outstanding at it. They got rid of Fulmer and Jimenez from their pen last year and Chafin, okay? Yet still have a good pen, right?
And Soto.
Yeah, and Soto. So that's 4 arms from last year's pen, which was very good, still rolling along fine. So I have confidence that even if they sell off a few, that they'll develop a few. So that part, they also have Cole Keith coming next year, who is an extremely interesting hitter. I know he's top 30, probably deserves just on the bat to be better than that. But how much does this remind you a little bit? Look, you were there for every bit of this Diamondbacks rebuild. They're on the verge now of being something, and they have a few people in their system. How much does what the Tigers is doing maybe parallel a little bit what the Diamondbacks did?
I don't really see a lot of parallels because of the route that they've gone with it. I mean, I think the Tigers build probably fits more the mold of what Atlanta tried to do when they started to rebuild, or what the Mets did in the mid-2010s, in that it really is a pitching-heavy organization still. And I think that's where it would be a little bit different in that regard. Now, I think that'll shift under Scott Harris, and I think certainly what you saw at the top of the draft this year kind of echoes that with Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal being their top 2 picks. There's more certainty when it comes to trying to develop hitters than it does with pitchers, which I realize sounds weird because hitting is the most difficult thing to do, but pitchers are greater. There are greater risks of injuries, as you've seen with guys like Casey Mize and obviously with Tarek Skubal and with
Matt Manning.
Matt Manning, Spencer Turnbull, right? Like all these guys have had injuries. And it doesn't mean that they aren't talented. They are very talented pitchers, but there's more risk involved. So I think there's a little bit of a transition in there, but I think to me, it's a little bit different than that. They need to, what Atlanta was able to do in that time as they were kind of transitioning, they made all those trades, they tried to build through pitching, was they managed to sign Ozzie Albies and Ronald Acuna Jr. internationally, right? And those are 2 pretty big moments for them in terms of what got them to this point. I'm not sure that those guys necessarily exist right now for the Tigers to sign, but I think that there's going to be a greater emphasis on that, and I think you're going to see them try and develop hitters. And in the meantime, like if you do have pitching, the pitching is always a commodity at the deadline, which is part of what makes this week so interesting for them, because as much as everybody's focused on Seattle for controllable starters that might be available via trade, I'm sure Scott Harris is willing to listen on some of the young starters that the Tigers have as well. Now, it doesn't mean he's going to move any of them, but that would be a way to kind of convert some of that prospect pitching capital, even if it's touched the big leagues, into more impactful offense potentially. So I think those things are things that I think would be a little bit of a difference. Arizona has been a little bit shorter on the pitching side. They have developed position players very well. All 3 of the outfielders they have, the one they traded in Dalton Varsho to get Gabriel Moreno, Geraldo Perdomo looks like he's going to be a pretty solid player. And they still have more coming. But I think I would say that they're a little bit different in that regard. That said, Green and Torkelson is still a pretty good duo to be able to build from if you're Detroit.
For sure. I mean, we're kind of dancing around the trade deadline stuff. And I know we spent the first half of this podcast talking about it. But Mike, when you look at what the Tigers have to deal at this trade deadline, what are we looking at in terms of maybe interested teams, maybe the type of return that the Tigers should be expecting? I know it's hard to forecast all that, but you got Michael Lorenzen, Eduardo Rodriguez, a bunch of relievers, and then maybe some surprises too, and controllable, maybe young pitchers that they could deal away.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious to see how it goes for them. They're not in a position where, really outside of Lorenzen, that they need to move anybody. And I was reading some of the stuff written today. I think Cody Stavenhagen had a comment that there was a little bit more. I guess maybe the market had cooled a little bit with regards to Rodriguez, and part of that is, and I think Evan, you and I talked about this in Seattle a couple of weeks ago. Just the nature of opt-outs makes things a lot more difficult, whether it's the reality of it or if it's just a negotiating ploy from the teams that are trying to trade with you. Like the reality is that there's still close to $50 million that could or could not be committed. And so finding the proper player for player value in trade just becomes more difficult. even though that number isn't significant, really significant for a pitcher of the quality of Eduardo Rodriguez. Like if he gets hurt and missed all of next year and you still had him for 2 years beyond next season as an acquiring team, like you'd be pretty happy at that number because he's pretty good. So I think those guys, I would be very curious to see exactly how deep they're willing to go to the bullpen. Lang and Foley have been the focus, I think, of most people kind of analyzing who the Tigers could move. I think, a couple of names that I mentioned, Brisky and Brendan White, would both be really, really interesting. We saw what the Cubs did last year with Scott Efros at the deadline and trading him to the Yankees, and getting a pretty good pitching prospect in Hayden Wisniewski, who really has good stuff. I mean, he's not quite refined yet, but that was a really good pickup for, a middle reliever. Is there somebody that's similar to that? Maybe. Certainly that kind of fits from the lineage of Scott Harris, right? Because he had been with the Cubs. But I don't know that I have necessarily specific names on where we go, but they have intriguing arms in the bullpen. They have intriguing arms in the rotation. And they also have a couple of multi-position guys who, have control left, who I think are important guys, or at least seem to be in the clubhouse, who could be of interest to teams. Nick Maton might be of interest, or Matt Vierling certainly would be, I think, to teams. So maybe you see something like that potentially as well. Those would be more the surprise rooms, the ones you're not looking for. I think most of the focus is going to be on Michael Lorenzen heading into Tuesday.
Well, Lorenzen is pretty much the slam dunk, trade candidate for them, right? I mean, he's kind of the guy, right? And Mark and I talked about this too, and I've written about it as well with the opt-out, with Eduardo Rodriguez. Now, my question there is, do you think that maybe will, smaller market, mid-market teams maybe shy away from that a little bit? I mean, could a team like the Dodgers, could they say, screw it, we don't care, like let's go for it? I mean, can we see something like that? Or do you think that it really doesn't matter across the board when it really gets down to it? It just comes down to maybe a little bit lesser value coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to gauge it, right? Like it's I think it's all situation dependent. I think there's still significant value, right, on both Lorenzen and on Rodriguez. Lorenzen threw the best baseball of his career, I think. And with Eduardo, like if you're a major market team, you can kind of look at that different. I mean, like I would say, if I were St. Louis, right, like I would be considering that and seeing if there's a way that you can, find a way to extend him after you acquire him, right? Like that's a little bit outside the box. Like let's look at St. Louis and what they've done, right? They have stated a preference to get controllable starting pitching because they only have 2 starters that are under control next year. They want to be able to compete. And the deals that they made today get them a couple of guys who are in Double-A, albeit ones that probably have a little bit lower ceiling. So is there something you can do where you look at acquiring a player like that and saying, hey, listen, like we'll rip up these 3 option years, but extend you at a really good number? Like that's something that I think theoretically can happen. I don't know how practical it is. So that would change the equation as well. But
could the Tigers do that?
Well, the Tigers could do that certainly and go to Rodriguez and say, hey, listen, like we want to keep you. We think you're valuable. We want to see if we can work out an extension. I think that would make a lot of sense for them too. But I think that's something that you handle after August 1st if you're the Tigers. It can't feel good for Eduardo Rodriguez to be dangling in the wind with trade considerations. Like waiting until after the deadline, waiting 2 more days probably makes sense. But if they don't move him, if I were the Tigers, I absolutely would be looking to try and do something like that because I think he's a really valuable commodity and that what you're going to get out of him. He's just the really solid major league pitcher. He's a number 3 starter in the big leagues, and those don't grow on trees.
Yeah, a guy you can start in a playoff game. I mean, yep. Evan and I have had these discussions a few times in the past 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, Eduardo Rodriguez is still not going to be that expensive. I mean, he's probably a $21 to $24 million a year pitcher. If you extend him, you give him $45 million basically to extend, even if you added a year with an option, with some type of vesting option for the 5th year. Now you got him for 5 years. You already got him for 3. You just rework the contract. I mean, Detroit then has a pretty solid group of starting pitchers going into 2024, and they can concentrate on getting some hitting because, their pitching's, barring injury, is going to be there. But I mean, look, they've had a lot of bad luck with injuries, but you got Mize coming back. You got Eduardo, you got Skubal. I wanted to talk about Skubal a little bit with you, Mike. I mean, I know you've had a chance to see him, but, ridiculous stuff. Still not sure exactly what you have. You have somewhere between somebody that's frustrating and a Cy Young winner. So
like most pitchers in baseball. Right?
Yeah, most pitchers in baseball. So, I mean, today being a perfect example. Shuts him down for 4 innings, gets into the 5th, doesn't cover first base, has some duress, melts down 4-4, leaves the game. So, not the first time for Tarek, but then there's other times just totally dominating. He had I don't know if you saw, we had a pretty interesting matchup today, Luzardo against Skubal.
Yeah.
Doesn't get much better than that.
I mean, I think the thing with Skubal is that I think it's easy to forget how inexperienced he is. I mean, after today, it's just over 320 innings,
right?
And of Major League Baseball, and for a guy who's coming off a pretty major injury to be running out a 7-1 strikeout to walk ratio coming into today is pretty ridiculous. I mean, he had more strikeouts than base runners allowed coming into today. So. Yeah, I mean, maybe you can say, it's inconsistent because he's let a couple get away. But like if he finished the month of April with 5 starts and the numbers that he's put together right now, you'd probably be pretty happy and looking for him to take another step forward. I think to me, it's experience. I realize that he's going to be 27 in November. And so it doesn't necessarily feel like he's an inexperienced pitcher, but there's still 3 years of team control with him beyond this year. And I think there's still a lot of room for growth. And you're right, the stuff is just overwhelming, and he's still learning. So, like, I'm in on Skubal. I think he's the best of the arms that they have. I think he has a chance to be the most bona fide of the young starters they have because he's got the best swing and miss stuff. If we're going to play out this hypothetical game of extending Eduardo Rodriguez, and you're going to have those two anchoring a rotation going forward, I think you're going to feel pretty good about your chances.
So I want to ask you one question because it's the elephant in the room. Tarek Skubal going to be 27, and he's thrown 300 innings between a TJ and a flexor tendon. Give you any pause?
Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a pitcher. So, yeah. I mean, always. Yeah. I mean, I think but I don't think any more than anything else. I mean, I think that certainly affects, like if you're talking about him on the trade market, I think it certainly affects his value because he's had injuries. But pitchers get hurt, and you're just going to have to deal with it. He has more value to the Tigers, in my mind, than he does anybody else because they know him. They've been through the rehab. And I think the fact that he came back from the flexor tendon injury and has thrown the ball as well as he has should be a pretty encouraging sign. You just have to play this game with any pitcher. If they have past injuries, it's the best predictor of future injury. But, you still want to dream on the talent. He's still relatively young at 26. Like that, you really want to be in a position to be able to try and take advantage of that prime.
All right. You got a long lineage of being, somebody that's really loved to study prospects. I know Ev wanted to ask you a couple of questions about that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal. Like, where are you at with those guys? And it seemed like the Tigers were pretty clever in the way they went about, this year's draft. They spent a ton of money, obviously, took advantage of all their resources that they had. Mm-hmm. What did you see from the Tigers just kind of up and down on that board? And then what do you got on Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal?
Yeah, I mean, I would add with Paul Wilson into that mix, right? The third rounder too, who was a big over slot guy. I mean, it was interesting that they went prep. This was a really deep prep class. I think that's part of the reason why people were excited about it as a draft. I mean, it was short on college pitching, but long on college middle infielders in particular, and on prep bats. And so, with Clark, I'm the only person in America that never saw Clark really go off in a game. But I'm literally the only person that didn't, because if you watched him, the reports that I got on him from area codes last year from scouts who saw him thought it was one of the best performances in area codes history. And I think what did he triple in his first game, right? In the FCL. So listen, he can run, he can play center field. He's got some swag to him. He was a wide receiver in high school too. So he's got a little bit of that wide receiver edge. And I dig that. I think that's a lot of fun. I think it's fair to question how much over the fence power there's going to be. But then again, we played that same game with Corbin Carroll, and he's going to go 30-30 this year, right? And Clark is more physical now than Carroll is. So I think he's a really intriguing talent. I love Kevin McGonigal, and anybody who spent time around him on the amateur circuit feels the same way. Dynamic personality, patterned his game after Chase Utley. The Philly guy, so as my buddy Mike Rooney would say, he's just filled with hashtag toughness and charisma. Like, he can really get the bat to the ball. I think he probably ends up as a second baseman, which will put a little bit more pressure on the bat. But he's a really fun player, and he's the kind of guy that I think if it clicks for him and he ends up becoming a major leaguer and a solid major leaguer, is going to be a fan favorite because of the way that he plays his game.
Have you ever seen Trevor Wilson or no? I mean,
yeah, I saw him at PG National. I think he was in the All-American game last year too. It's a good arm. It's Paul Wilson, right? Because Trevor's his dad, right?
Yeah, Trevor's his dad. Thank you.
So, it's a really good arm. You can understand why Oregon State committed him. He wasn't like my favorite arm in the class, but I certainly understand why he went where he did in the third round. It's not like I disliked him. I thought he was pretty good. But it's good stuff, and it's just a long path to development. I think Tiger fans are watching that with Jackson Jobe, right? Who is a little bit higher profile, obviously, than what Wilson is, but he's a pretty impressive guy.
Mike, I wanted to touch on something that is a little outside the box, but, you really started doing, podcasting and in the industry a long time before it was popular. I mean, all of us have a podcast and talk baseball on whether, it's on a pod or, it's come a long way. You started doing this, almost 15 years ago. You were part of some of the most famous podcasts ever done when nobody was doing them. Talk a little bit about how you've seen the evolution of people talking baseball and how they do it now.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that there are more people that are interested in putting out baseball-specific products. I've been fortunate that baseball's been the only sport that I've covered since I started at Sirius in July of 2007. And the podcast you're referencing is the one that I did with Jason Parks, who's now the professional scouting director for the Diamondbacks, and it was called Fringe Average, and it was focused more on scouting and player development. I think the fact that there are more people that are willing to share that, there are more listeners for podcasts, is extremely healthy for the sport. And I think, discourse helps to lead to better evaluation and understanding of the game. And so I think, some of them are really good if you're just into I want to yell and scream like a fan. And there are others that are really good if you want to dig in deep. I think there's still more that can be done on the scouting and player development side in that, because I think that's just from my standpoint, I find that the most fascinating part. I mean, that's the part of the game I love the most, is trying to figure out how you take the left brain part of evaluation and marry it with the right brain that we have in data collection and information, in building a really strong evaluative model or process. And so I think there's more to be gained there still too. But I love the fact that it continues to grow. I think the fact that we're seeing fans come back to major league ballparks and minor league ballparks in big numbers over the course of the last year is extremely healthy for the game. And the more that we have people that are interested in baseball, the better, whether they want to do a podcast, that just yells and screams about their seventh inning guy, or if they want to do one that digs in deep into what's going on in A-ball. I think all of that is a real positive.
You touched on something that I wanted to, before we let you go, ask you about. Attendance is up. Rule changes have had a lot to do with this season, and I think a lot to do with improving the fan experience. Give me your thought about that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I was in the bag for the aggressive pitch clock after seeing it in the Fall League 2 years ago. The first Fall League game we did after the World Series that year was an 11-10 game that lasted 2 hours and 12 minutes, and you were like, okay, this is the way it's supposed to be paced, right? And I think it's been a big factor. I had a coach who recently retired, who I'd had an argument with about the pitch clock a few years ago, who walked up to me on the field the other day and was like, I hate to say it, but you were right. He's like, no, I would still hate it if I were a player because it just changes your routine. He's like, but it's really made a big difference. I think it's it's one of the most significant changes that baseball has ever had. I mean, the rule book has long had a pitch timer written into it. It just never has had the clock on the field to time it. I think that it has made a significant difference in terms of making the product more watchable, not just at the major league level, but at the minor league and at the collegiate level. In fact, I would argue that the pitch clock in college baseball has made the biggest impact of the three, major league, minor league, and college, because it has taken away the need to micromanage every single moment of the game, and it has made it far more enjoyable to watch. So I'm all in on these. I think these are terrific changes.
ABS or the challenge system?
Challenge system. I've seen the challenge system in action, and it's going to be fan-friendly. The one thing I have is a little bit of a concern is, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but the AAA walk rate right now is about 12%, which normally it's about 8.5%. And remember, they've been running ABS out 3 days a week and then ABS, the challenge system, on the weekends. And I would love to see some breakdowns on what those numbers are and what's happened with that, because that to me is really interesting in that, and I'm sure that this is data that's being collected. I know it's data that's being collected in Major League Baseball. They've already made some adjustments over the course of setting the ABS restrictions in terms of the width is actually 21 inches instead of 17, which is what home plate is. And what they do is they take it from, I think it's like 27% of a player's height to 51.5% of their height is the bottom to the top of the strike zone. So, all those things are things that they've done. I'd be curious to see if they adjust it further, because the walk rate right now in the majors is about 8.5%, and that's not out of line with where it has been traditionally. In fact, it's lower than it was 40 years ago. Generally, it's been somewhere between 8.5% and 9.5%. That's the one concern I would have with it right now, and would like to see how they make adjustments going further.
You think it's a 2024 thing or a 2025 thing?
2025 probably, or 26. They don't want to make any more seismic changes next year. I think they've had. They made enough this season, right, in terms of all the rules that they changed, that both in terms of giving that a little bit of a rest and also getting another year's worth of data collection on it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, from what you shared about tweaking the data and how, they tweaked it more than a little bit, it might make sense to see what the revisions do and then tweak it a little bit more. And then they probably
those revisions were made a long time ago. Those revisions were made when in the early days of when they first tested it in the Atlantic League. So they've been humming with this version of it for a while now.
Ev, you got to catch a plane yet or not?
I'm writing in the show sheet right now. Hey, I got to go. No, look, Mike, we got to let you go because I got to catch a plane.
Yeah.
But I want to get you on the record. You're going to come back and do this again, right? Because this has been awesome. I mean, you were great.
Yeah, man, anytime. I love talking ball. Mark knows. Mark's argued with baseball with me for years. So.
Hey, Mike, are you coming back to do any more Tiger games this year, or it was a one-time thing this year?
I don't know. I would love to if the opportunity presented itself, but as of right now, I was asked to do those 3 games, and I'm thrilled that I got the chance to do it.
Yeah, well, we'll have Evan talk to somebody because, he has some pull there.
Tigers, call him.
Hey, Mike, I can't tell you what an honor it was to have you come on. We hope to have you on again. We hope you're well, and we'll hopefully talk some baseball before the year's over.
All right, guys, take care. Enjoy the trade deadline.
You too.
Yeah, thank you.
Ev, what'd you think of that? Because it was just amazing information.
Yeah, he's as good as it gets. I mean, that was a great gift for us, and I'm really excited to have him back. We got to get some more, people on the podcast just to talk about their knowledge and their insight. You've mentioned it a couple of times now, Bobby Scales, who does color with Dan Dickerson on the road. I mean, he's as good as it gets as well, and someone who, brings really great knowledge from different avenues of the game. He's somebody that we definitely want to get on, and we'll try to keep him coming as we go. But I do like what Mike had to say about the Tigers and controllable starting pitchers that they might be able to trade away. I hinted at that earlier. I think we might be talking to some of the same people when we both mentioned Arizona. Maybe not sure. But, I don't know. I think the Tigers and the Diamondbacks, like I mentioned before, could link up and, Tigers could maybe use one of those young, controllable starting pitchers, maybe Reese Olson, to make a deal there. Who knows? We'll see what happens. So much is going to go down. But I don't know. I do like what I heard from Mike, too, that the Tigers are on the right track. And I believe it, when I hear it from him, because he's someone that's been in this game for a long time and he sees it from, the national perspective from way out, and I'm in it on the day-to-day, right? And to kind of get his, longer view perspective on that situation and how things are going, sounds like positive moving forward.
Listen, I don't know how you don't get smarter listening to Mike Ferrin discuss baseball for a half hour. It's, just the best man discussing baseball in America. I defy you to have somebody on that is more fun and more knowledgeable than Mike Ferrin. Learned a bunch of things. I still think the Tigers may have something to cook up with. A team like Baltimore would also be somebody that's
perfect fit for Lorenzen.
Right. Also, maybe Cincinnati. We'll see what they have to say. I mean, the idea with St. Louis is a really good idea. I just don't think the days of St. Louis being a super shrewd, thinking out of the box type of team, I think the era is over, and they're struggling to find their way. So thinking out of the box, I don't know if they can think in the box or out of the box, either one. So, all right, it's time for Evan Petzold to get on an airplane and fly back. Hopefully there's 3 trades while you're in the air. And just know that as soon as the Tigers do something and Scott Harris does something, Mark Gorash and Evan Petzold will come on here and at least give you a few minutes of analysis, whether we like it, whether we hate it, and what they did. So for my partner, Evan Petzold, for our executive producer, Kirk Crawford, and Jeanette Delgado, for our producer, Robin Chan, who has his work cut out for him this week, piecing all this together. I also want to thank, as always, my beautiful grandson, Braden Michael Gorash. And until we discuss the trades that are going to get made in the next 2 days, this is Mark Gorash, and all I have to say to you out there, peace.